So I said, well, have I committed a crime? Is that why you're ringing me? And he said, no. And I said, well, why are you ringing me then? And he said, because this person is upset and offended.
The police now are part of the problem. They've always been the political arm to a certain extent, but they're over politicized now.
Is the reason for that is because you've been having these meetings with newspaper editors asking them not to cover it because it might hide some community tensions. Well, the meeting blew up. And I find it absolutely hilarious that you've got Angela Rayner and Jim McMahon in charge of local government when Oldham and Tameside are complete basket cases.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is a gentleman I've been wanting to speak to now for a good few months, and you'll understand why in a minute. But first of all, welcome Liam Billington, Tory councillor for Stalybridge South in Tameside.
Yeah, that's correct.
How are you doing?
I'm good, Nick, and yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. I know Tameside Council quite well. I used to work with Tameside Council when I worked for Manchester Council because the border touches each other. When I was working in Clayton, we had kids messing around from Droylsden. I've worked on markets in Tameside when I was a market trader 30, 40 years ago. And my charity, when I set my charity up, we've done some work in Denton and around Denton and Hyde. So I know Tameside fairly well. How long have you been a councillor there?
I've been a councillor since 2018, and actually one of the things that what drove me to be a councillor in Stalybridge was the fact that we don't have a market anymore. And what I want to do is to drive and improve the local economy of the borough. You see other areas like Altrincham, which have had their regeneration. And back in 2018, I was saying that Stalybridge should basically the market hall, which has been empty since 2001, I think it is. Fantastic historic building, just been laying empty for years. What I thought was, well, we should emulate what Altrincham are doing. It is a big space, so one of the things I was saying was make it multi-use. So the upstairs of it, turn it into service offices, and then the downstairs have it as a food hall with live entertainment as well. Unfortunately, as you know, with Labour, they're very slow to move on these things, and I don't think they actually want areas to grow and do well, because I think what they want is people to be under the thumb of the state and for areas to just go downhill so that they can say, look, you're in poverty and we're the party for you. But really, I think, what you're seeing in Tameside now is people are saying, well, hang on a minute, that isn't the answer at all, because we've had Labour for 45, nearly 50 years now, and it's obviously not working for them. That's why, even in the latter years of the Conservative government, Conservatives were actually gaining seats in Tameside, and we've just seen Reform win a seat in Longdendale, which is one of Labour's safest seats. Again, in St Peter's ward in Ashton-under-Lyne, lost to an independent as well. And that was also one of Labour's safest seats.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with many councils. All councils are incompetent. I think it just goes with territory. Councils need looking at across the country. They're all incompetent. Just like senior government, just like Whitehall. We've allowed some sort of virus to infect all our layers of government, and none of it works properly. None of it works for the people. They work for themselves. Let's jump into the two topics I wanted to talk to today. But before we do that, Stalybridge is a beautiful part of the world.
Fantastic town, fantastic town.
You really should be looking at, like you probably are, tourism. That market hall as a food hall sounds fantastic because Stalybridge is beautiful.
It is. It's a really gorgeous town. And one of the things I've been saying is we should be the next Upper Mill. And for you who don't know it, Upper Mill, Saddleworth is the more affluent part of Oldham. Some of you viewers will be familiar with Oldham, with the CSE, the child sexual exploitation that's going on. But really, Oldham is split into two. You've got the Saddleworth side, which is really picturesque and stunning. And then you've got the Oldham side where it is really deprived. And my vision is to make Stalybridge like that. And we have got things in place there. Stalybridge train station. It's only 9 minutes on the train to Manchester Victoria. And you can also get a train to Leeds in just over half an hour. There's some connections to Liverpool as well. And all in the backdrop of the most beautiful countryside. It's just fantastic. You got the benefits of living in an inner city, but with the picturesque countryside surrounding you. So we've got everything going for us. And unfortunately, with a Labour-run council, we're being held back, and I'm trying to push that agenda to try and make Stalybridge a really great place to live.
Well, I know you are pushing things because every time I hear your name now, it's in the press, it's on social media, because someone is trying to shut you up all the time. Let's be honest about local councillors outside the local area. No one's ever heard of a local councillor from someone else's area. It's a very local position for local people dealing with local issues. But you've hit the headlines twice in this last few months, and that's how I came across your name. So let's talk about the most recent one first of all, because this is quite surreal. Tell me if this is accurate. You posted a picture of another Tameside councillor's car registration plate, not to put them in danger, not to have a go at them, just to raise the fact that their private personal registration says Mao and then 246 or something. But Mao was an horrendous Chinese communist dictator who led to the murder of at least 60 million Chinese people, if not more. And we have many far left idiots in this country who praise people like Mao and Stalin and Lenin as if they're the good guys. And you pointed out that one of the politicians in Tameside has this personal number plate. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah. So I've actually posted a similar picture before. So if you remember a couple of years ago with the clean air zone debate that was going around, I was going into a meeting council and to discuss that topic actually. And I thought it was hilarious that you've got a Labour councillor driving around in a Mercedes, such as, a good little socialist that they are, driving around in a luxury brand. And then to have a private number plate with Mao on it as well. I just thought the hypocrisy of that. What was hilarious at the same time is another picture that I've taken was next to it was a pickup truck, a diesel pickup truck owned by the Green councillor at the time. You know, and that didn't comply with Andy Burnham's clean air zone tags, the NO2, it had to be under a certain limit. Didn't comply with that at all. But his excuse was he needed that for his business. And that's all well and good. So that's what we've been saying. People need these vehicles for the businesses. But then, the Greens are then going around saying, well, you shouldn't be doing this. And it's like, well, obviously they are because one of your councillors needs a diesel pickup truck for his gardening business. I have no issue with that, but just don't tell people that what they should be doing is my thing.
It's the hypocrisy of it all. It's the hypocrisy that gets us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I posted that some time ago, and then that same councillor from the Labour Party with the Mao registration plate, they were doing some event recently where they played the national anthem, and there was a number of Labour councillors there, and they didn't sing the national anthem, and I thought, well, that's a bit bad. If you're a councillor and you're at an event and they play the national anthem, you're expected to sing it as a matter of protocol. I just think it's good manners, really. And basically, that councillor was the one with the Mao registration plate. So I said, is it any wonder that they refused to sing the national anthem when they've got Mao on the license plate? And I just posted a picture of it, and then the day or two later, I got a phone call withheld number from Ashton Police Station. Can't remember the officer's name. He introduced himself and said that we've had a complaint and the person wishes you to take down the picture of their car with their number plate on. So I said, well, have I committed a crime? Is that why you're ringing me? And he said, no. And I said, well, why are you ringing me then? And he said, because this person is upset and offended. And it's like, why? Why are we, um, why are the police chasing around on this? We're going to talk about CSE later. There is something very similar and sinister. And I'll send you the screenshots of the emails as well that I had with the CSE incident. But I said to him, so no crime's been committed then? And he said, no. And I said, right, well, it stays up then. So he said, right, well, I have to make a log of it and refer it back to the complainant. Now, I've had a conflicting story. Now, one person has told me that it isn't the councillor with the registration plate that has put in a complaint, but another senior Labour councillor. I have an idea who that is. They have told me, but I can't. There's nothing to prove that just yet. But that's what I'm working on, basically, to prove that because it's a misuse of police resources at the end of the day, and I don't think police should be going around policing things like that when there's bigger priorities in the area like burglaries.
No, absolutely. If that councillor with the Mao number plate, are we allowed to name this councillor with the Mao number plate?
You can do if you want.
What's the name?
Naila Sharif.
Naila Sharif. So if they've got a Mao number plate, which isn't a normal number plate, this is something they've had to buy extra to show off, because that's what private number plates are about, showing off, letting everybody see that you have a private number plate. So they're not trying to hide that they're the council. They're not trying to hide. They want you to see their private number plate. And then to have the police involved, which isn't a crime. And you said, misuse of police resources. The police in this country now are turning into the Gestapo, the Stasi. They're now becoming arms of our political elite. They're the brown shirts to the politicians sat in the town hall or in Westminster. It's absolutely disgraceful. If that councillor had an issue with you sharing that photo, and they may have an issue, they may even have a legitimate issue with you sharing that photo, we don't know. That's a private matter. That's a civil matter. You should be getting a solicitor's letter, and and that
there's no nothing to say that it would actually be a civil matter, to be honest with you, because it's not defamation of sorts. So
no, but I mean civil matter as in between two civilians. I'm not saying it broke any civil law. I'm just saying it's a civil matter between two people. Doesn't need the police involved. If he's got an issue with it, or he or she's got an issue with it, then it should have been a solicitor's letter. But a solicitor would have said to them, this is a complete waste of my time writing to somebody. If you want to give me under the 50 quid for doing it, the police. I mean, I don't know if you know much about me, but I spent 20 years working with the police. I was based in police stations when I worked for Manchester Council. I've trained police officers. I've created award-winning police plans and projects. And when I set up my crime reduction charity, that worked alongside the police as well. I know the police extremely well. I used to be a huge supporter of the police up to this year, basically, up to when they arrested that man in Manchester city centre for burning a Quran, then released all these details online, knowing he could be assassinated by some radical nutcase. And that's when I realised the police now are part of the problem. They've always been the political arm to a certain extent, but they're over politicized now. They're not just dealing with the law. We use the phrase now two-tier system, and it's evident to everybody. And your example, that number plate, is another example of that. You're an elected official. You represent so many thousand people in your area. You're an elected official. You should be treated slightly better than other people because you're an elected official.
I don't see that I should be treated any differently. But just to give it some perspective, you've had Raj Amir on your podcast before. Raja won't mind me saying. Raja just actually lives up the road from me. He lives in Tameside, and he's been harassed so many times on so many jumped up charges, which have amounted to nothing. Okay. So the police actually have form for this in the borough. And it's just recently as well that, Tameside is the same borough where we've had this Trigger Me Timbers WhatsApp leak. Well, and there was recently a story in the Daily Mail where there was an elderly lady. Well, I won't say the word elderly. That's quite offensive to her. She wasn't elderly, but she was grandma.
You're going to get another phone call off the police is coming tomorrow now.
Yeah. I think I might be getting a phone call off her. There was this lady, she posted on Facebook that councillors should resign. Fair comment. People disagree with what I say, and people will say that I should resign over it. That's freedom of speech at the end of the day, and people have the opportunity to do that at the ballot box. I've stood for election 3 times now in Stalybridge South, and I've won 3 times. So, but to call for someone to resign shouldn't be an offence. And she had 2 detectives turn up on her doorstep for saying that.
I saw the video. I saw the video. They were plainclothes detectives. Absolutely shocking.
Yeah. So we have an issue with GMP in Tameside, and we've got proof and evidence now that the Labour Party are using the police as their own personal force, and they are being treated differently. But I don't believe just because I'm a councillor, if I did something wrong, I would expect the police to use the full force of the law against me. Just because I'm elected does not exempt me whatsoever, and nor should it grant me any specialist treatment should something happen to me that I may feel aggrieved by. So we need to get into proper policing. And I think, Nick, you talk about, you're saying that you lost respect for the police quite recently. The respect for the police has been ebbing away, and I would say it's through some of the changes that were brought in by the last Blair government by reducing standards. I mean, it's a controversial thing to say, but to be a police officer years ago, you had to pass a fitness test and of a certain sort. You would have to be of a certain height and standard to be a police officer. Now, I could get a job as a police officer. I'm short and fat, and they're giving these jobs away to like basically people fresh from university with a certain viewpoint on the world, which have been indoctrinated by these universities. And basically what we see now is police officers, well, sorry, social workers with truncheons, and the police are doing a lot of the work, basically what council should be doing in adult services and children's services. A lot of the things that the police get called out in my ward, as an example, is children's homes. So private children's homes, as an example, I know you've worked in this area before. Um, they have, they'll give the kids a curfew, say 9 o'clock they have to be in by. And if that child isn't back in by 9 o'clock, 1 minute past 9, they ring up the police. And because it ticks a box with their Ofsted inspection to say that they've done the correct safeguarding. But then because of the law, the police have to drop everything that they're doing to find that missing child. So, again, why aren't these companies who are being paid extortionate amounts? Some of these children's homes are being paid £8,000 a week to house these children.
Yeah. Per child, sometimes per child. Yeah.
Yeah. So why aren't these companies actually looking after these kids properly? So I, I, I do have some sympathy for the police, but they do bring a lot of it on themselves by like treating people differently. Like we've seen, on GB News, there was there's more people who are locked up over the summer riots or for posting things on Facebook than there is actual people who were involved in grooming gangs, and that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. the demise of the police started in the 60s. They started reducing standards in the 60s and 70s to allow more women to join. So they had to reduce the height, they had to reduce physical fitness, and it's the rot started then. Then they had to reduce in the 80s and 90s, they had to reduce it even more to get ethnic minorities to join the police. That's not because ethnic minorities can't join the police or wouldn't make good police officers, because they do. It's because the ones who would make great police officers are being pushed to be doctors, surgeons, solicitors, and barristers by their parents. So we don't get the cream joining the police. So we have to lower standards to get any ethnic minority to join to keep the numbers up. And then woke ideology came along, and now the police don't know what a woman is. The police, there's a video the other day where somebody was being questioned on the street. He was hard of hearing and told someone speak clearly, and because he said it to an ethnic minority, they reported it to the police, and the police came out and spoke to him. He went, I'm partially deaf, I'm registered disabled. I said speak clearly so I can hear them, and the police came out to speak to him about that. I have real sympathy for many of the officers working on the front line, because they're really good people and join for the right reasons. But as you go up the ranks, they all need sorting out. Many of them need sacking. Many of our top brass all need sacking, and we need to start again at the top. We haven't got a problem with lower down the ranks. They just do as they're told. They just want to be catching thieves, not being social workers, and not being social justice warriors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the rot in Manchester, more so. Peter Fahey was the worst chief constable in Manchester's history, and he has a lot to answer for. Why he's on all these different government bodies, but I think the reason is because he's so woke. He's dragged down the standards of policing, and people don't have any respect for it anymore.
Yeah, and he left before any trouble started. He knew when to go, because 18 months, 2 years later, the police were in special measures, and that was all done under his watch. It wasn't the new chief constable, who was still crap, but he did destroy the police in 18 months. It was Peter Faye over 10, 15 years. And we need to remember the person Peter Faye took over from. I forgot his name now, but he killed himself.
Michael Todd, yeah.
Yeah, he was having, from what I believe, so many affairs and things like that. He walked.
Again with that, he was having an affair with she was the chief executive of Midas, which shows you how incestuous all these different organizations are. I remember at the time, because I've been involved in politics for some years, I remember when Midas and the Manchester Chamber of Commerce, because that wasn't, run by businesses, that was run by AGMA, which is the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities, which predates the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And the businesses were all saying, we don't want a congestion charge. But the Chamber of Commerce backed it, and it ended up losing loads of members. And now it's completely publicly funded through different councils with the growth company as it's known today. So, yeah, there's a lot of incestuous relationships.
You scratch my back and I'll scratch your back. You
Back scratch tester.
Yeah, you help me stay in position. You help me get that promotion, and I'll be in a better position to help you get promoted, to help cover up that problem that might be coming down the path. This is the problem.
Yeah. It's all over Greater Manchester. If someone fails as a top director in Manchester, they then moved on to just another council. It happens all the time. Look at Tameside at the moment. You've got Harry Catherall, the chief executive, who's now the chief executive of Tameside, came from Oldham Council, and we all know what's going on there. And it's like people are being rewarded for failure, and yet they still keep these very high six-figure salaries, which are a far cry from what the residents of the borough earn.
Yeah, let me just correct you there. They're not being rewarded for failure. They're being rewarded for keeping their mouths shut. That's why they're never sacked, because they know too many secrets and can hurt so many people that they're moved sideways to keep their mouths shut. That's why that happens. Let's jump into what happened at the beginning of the year, or when I first found out about this was the beginning of the year. I believe at some point before that, you was in the Tameside Chamber Council the council town hall chamber having a meeting. You were stood up talking about child sexual exploitation going on in Tameside, which is never discussed. You know, that's one of the areas of Manchester, Greater Manchester, that we think this doesn't exist. And you were quoting official documents produced by the council that were saying 30 children every quarter. So, you know, so 120 kids a year are being abused in Tameside, and you were raising that and talking about that. They turned your mic off and told you to shut up.
And cut the webcast, yeah.
Can go into that a bit more detail.
Right. So it's actually been going on for a couple of years, and I've been watching what's been going on in Greater Manchester with CSE because it's absolutely disgusting. It's dreadful. And, you see the map, there's cases, there's problems in Stockport, there's problems in Oldham, there's problems in Rochdale, there's problems in Manchester. These are all boroughs that surround Manchester. No one's talking about Tameside. So do these paedophiles just stop at the border at Tameside and turn around? No, they don't. It's definitely happening here, and we need to uncover that. So, round about 2020, it was just before the pandemic, and they just released one of the reports into Oldham through GMCA. So the leader of the council at the time, Brenda Warrington, called what we call members development. So these are briefings for councillors done in private, and we can ask questions quite candidly without the public being there. That's not being lack of transparency. That's so that you can obtain the facts, ask questions, which may not be palatable for some people to hear. But eventually it does come out into the open. So we had a member development session on child sexual exploitation in the borough as a result of Oldham. Councillor Warrington, she said that she wanted to be fully open and transparent about it, and that's why she was doing this meeting. And she wanted to demonstrate that Tameside didn't have the same issues as what Oldham does. So we're going through the presentation, and it was clear to me that there was a problem because they got onto a slide and it said 30 cases, active cases in any given quarter. So I'm like thinking, well, that's a lot. And why are you reporting it quarterly? You've worked with the public sector in the past. These sort of things, they'll be monitored on a monthly or annual level. Never use quarterly for looking at data. It's always monthly or annually. And I just thought they're trying to mask something here by saying it's quarterly. So if you say 10 every month, that makes it sound very frequent. If you say 120 a year, that number's a lot bigger and would alarm people. So I knew that the council was trying to put a political spin on it. We're going further into the presentation, and not once did they mention any sort of like demographics of people who've been arrested or anything like that, which again said to me, if you're not willing to admit part of the problem, again, there is an issue. And so the chief executive at the time did questions, and we was joined by a detective from Greater Manchester Police there, and they said, everything's fine and that. And I said, well, where's this happening? And they said, well, why do you need to know that? And I said, well, it would help because you've not given any information about demographics and anything else like that. And there was a bit of an argument to and forth, and eventually they relented and they said it was takeaways in Hyde and taxi drivers in Ashton.
No surprise there then.
So based on those job profiles, the demographics, the high likelihood is that the Muslim men or Pakistani men or Bangladeshi men in those areas hide as a very high Bangladeshi population. Ashton, it's more Pakistani population. And so we was getting somewhere. Then, from several years ago, the chief executive, Stephen Pleasant, he was a contributor to a report by the Department for Communities and Local Government in 2008, and they were seeking ways of best practice maintaining community cohesion in the area. So Tameside Council, Stephen Pleasant, submitted their response on what they do. And he said that he meets with local newspaper editors to suppress sensationalist reporting. That's a direct quote, suppress sensationalist reporting, which might otherwise add to community tensions. And I can send you that document if you want. It's all there. And so I asked him, I said, we've never heard of CSE or child grooming in Tameside. Is the reason for that is because you've been having these meetings with newspaper editors asking them not to cover it because it might hide some community tensions. Well, the meeting blew up. He started shouting and screaming at me, poking, prodding me, going, "You better fucking retract that." Oh, it was awful. He told me to apologize. I wouldn't do it. I said I was just asking a question, quite simple to do, and he wouldn't accept it. So there was some backwards and forwards between that, and basically I refused to apologize.
Good for you.
And they threatened me with legal action. Nothing came of it. And it just sort of slipped away. And then there was more reports about CSE coming out, and then there was again it was about Oldham, and someone tweeted about CSE in Oldham, and I just did a quote tweet, and I said, everyone talks about Oldham, not to take it away from those victims in Oldham, but no one discusses what's going on in Tameside. Now, it's of my belief that there is more CSE in Tameside because there was an FOI that was done. And I think it was in the figure over a decade, Oldham had just over 500 cases across a decade. I think it was between 2008 and 2018, there was just over 500. Well, if Tameside is getting 120 a year on average, then that means that we've had 1,200. So something is going on and something's being kept from us. And so I just did a quote tweet mentioning that. And that was on a Saturday night. On Monday afternoon, I got a phone call from a detective saying that the inspector would like me to go into the police station. And I asked why, and he said, because of the tweet that you've done. And I said, which one? It could be any, you know. So he said, well, the stuff that you've been saying about child sexual exploitation. I said, well, have I said anything wrong in there? And he said, well, we'd like to discuss that at the police station. And I said, well, have I committed a crime? And he said, well, we haven't established that yet. So I thought, here we go.
Yeah.
So I told my group leader, Dorian Dickinson, we had a chat with it as a Conservative group on the council. And at the time, colleague Councillor Ruth Welsh, she was deputy leader. She was also shadow for children's on the council. And she worked with someone who's now a barrister. He said, if I were you, I wouldn't voluntarily go to the police station. And if you are to go, go with somebody. So I responded to the emails because I asked them to email me with this on. And then we was organising dates and that. I wanted to know because one of the things that they said on the phone call that it was as a result of a complaint that was at the command meeting and it went through to the local what are they called? The chief superintendents or whatever. Uh, the ones for the division. So for Tameside, the head honcho for Tameside. The complaint had got through to him. So my question was, well, how do you make a complaint to the most senior police officer in Tameside? I can't just ring 999 or 101 and demand to speak to the chief inspector.
Yeah. The divisional commander, they're called.
Yeah, divisional commander. I can't just do that. No one can. You couldn't do that. Member of the public can't. So it's got to come from someone else senior. And I was asking, are you monitoring my social media or where was it coming from? They just completely point blank refused to discuss that. Then my colleague, Ruth, the inspector, he came back with a date, and Ruth said that she wasn't able to make that date because she was at a funeral. So the inspector said, well, we'll just see Liam then, and we'll do this Friday. And I thought, no, you're not doing that. And then it ticked because there was such an urgency that they had to see me. What they wanted was, I think, they wanted me to be arrested before the full council meeting, which was on the Tuesday. So what preluded that? Unfortunately, I haven't got the whole meeting recorded, and Tameside Council deleted it from YouTube. But what preluded that was a speech from one of the councillors saying that I was refusing to cooperate with the police over an investigation on CSE. Now, I weren't, part of any investigation specifically, but the way that they worded it made it sound like I was, and I was being obstructive. I wasn't.
It's a great way of playing with words. If they can rephrase something, people who won't read the article just read the headline, and it says local councillor obstructing police in child sex exploitation case. That sounds like you're a pedo. Where if they then read the whole story, they then find out the rest of the information. But most people just read the headline, and it's a great way to discredit you. They do it with Roger Mia all the time.
Well, yeah. So he was arrested as part of the operation into investigating the grooming gangs, and the police put out a press release on that, and knew exactly what they were doing.
Oh, and that's why I'm not a supporter of the UK police anymore now, because they're not fit for purpose. They are a Stasi, they are a Gestapo, working for sinister figures, trying to manipulate the people and trying to push a political agenda.
So, yeah, with the police, it's like, who are they protecting? And what you got to remember with Tameside as well is we've had these incidents where people have been wrongly approached by the police. So, like Raja Mir, who's been harassed, that lady who called for her councillors to resign. But who are the people at the top? Well, you've got Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister.
You have. I forget about her sometimes. Yeah. She's extremely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what people don't make the connection with as well is she also was MP for Oldham at one point because her old constituency boundaries covered Failsworth. So it, if there was something embarrassing to come out about Oldham or Tameside, it would reflect very much on Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And who are the people around her? Well, you've got Jonathan Reynolds in Stalybridge and Hyde, the fake solicitor who's now business secretary. You know, Jim McMahon in Oldham, the borough next door, He's a local government minister. And I find it absolutely hilarious that you've got Angela Rayner and Jim McMahon in charge of local government when Oldham and Tameside are complete basket cases of councils. And then up until he got sacked, you had Andrew Gwynn, who was public health minister as well. So there's a lot of people and reputations to protect. And I think when this comes out in the open, I think there'll be lots more uncovered that we don't know. And I have a feeling it's to protect very senior politicians above that.
And let me add another layer to this. There's a very good chance when Keir Starmer falls this summer, Angela Rayner could be Prime Minister. So not only is she an extremely powerful politician today, everyone's looking at her going, you could be the most powerful politician by the end of this year. I need to keep on your good side. I need to make sure that you're not looking at me in a few months' time going, you didn't sort me out when I needed, a favor. So you can see how all this happens.
Yeah, well, that's happened already in Tameside. They forced the resignation of the chief executive, Sandra Stewart, who I had a lot of time for. Thought she was very good. Now that row was all to do with the pension fund. Rachel Reeves wants to merge all local government pension funds, and Tameside said no. So what they did was they've got rid of Sandra and they got rid of Jed Cooney. Um, and that is so we're already seeing that ball rolling with senior officers.
Why is national government interested in council pensions? My my warning system's already been set off now. I'm thinking, do they want to get their hands on council pensions so they can invest that money, use that money to help save them and their government?
Yes, absolutely. So that's what they're planning on doing. So what Rachel Reeves has realized is the country is skint because COVID, Ukraine, we've had all these different things. And um, without them, I reckon we'd have had a really strong economy. You can't judge, the success of Brexit when we've had all these global shocks brought on us. So she knows that the country is skint, and she knows that she needs something to show for it at the next general election, which I think will be in 2029. If you're thinking that this is the worst government that you've endured, don't think that they're going to go, oh, yeah, we agree, and we're going to have a general election. They've been out of power for 14 years and they want to savor every year that they have at their disposal. And they want to change the fabric of this country fundamentally with things like votes at 16 and that to try and ensure that they can stay in for a generation. And so she wants the pension fund. Greater Manchester Pension Fund is the largest local government pension fund in the country. And it's worth £36 billion. And it's one of the most successful. It's 120% funded. So it can cope with some of the shocks that we've seen in the financial markets recently. So she wants to borrow against that to pay for infrastructure. That's what it's all about. But what will happen is that taxpayers will have to pay for the liability. So there's other pension funds across the country which aren't as successful. There's some councils where even before a street is swept, 20% of your council tax goes on plugging the pensions gap. Now, because of the good management of the Greater Manchester Pension Fund, you're not subsidising local authority pensions. You're not having to do that. So that means there's more money for those frontline services. And if we was to have some of the liabilities that other councils have, that could mean that, things like in children's services, special educational needs, which is huge pressure on councils at the moment, that will end up being cut because we have no option to do that because we're having to fund a liability of other councils. So it's not good at all. But those people, those MPs who are very senior, have been pushing that, and because Tameside councillors refuse that, it's now being forced on us. And they've got rid of Jed Cooney, and they got rid of the chief executive as a result of that. It's absolutely shambolic what they're doing.
We're in a mess. I think we all know we're in a mess. We've been in a mess for a long time, but things are getting worse and worse as days go by. Let's end on a high. Let's end on a prediction. You're the type of person who's not going to keep your mouth shut. You're the type of person who's going to carry on doing what you do, and good for you for doing it. What's going to be the next thing that gets you a phone call from the police and gets you national attention? What is the next thing, Liam, that you're going to do?
I don't know. I don't plan these things. I just don't plan these things. Like I could cause trouble in an empty house. Perhaps there's something I've said on this podcast that someone's not going to like, and that ends up, in some newspaper or quoted out of context or whatever. But honestly, I don't give a shit. And I just go on, bang on, do what I do. And at the end of the day, people can vote for me or they can vote against me or they can vote for someone else. But, I always stick to my values and my principles and speak truth. There's times where I've gone against my own party. There's times where I supported my party where it's been the unpopular thing to do because I believe in that. So I continue doing that, and all I want is the best for my area for Tameside because I think it's been dragged down for far too long by Labour for the past 45 years, and it desperately needs change. There's plenty of areas in Manchester that need change, and what I'm saying is it's not uncommon across other councils as well. But, people trusted me and voted for me. So I will use that voice to make sure that, their priorities are heard and people want the council to be held to account, whether they like it or not. I'm here to stay.
Good for you. Carry on doing what you're doing. Keep speaking up. Even if it turns out down the line that you were wrong, it doesn't matter. We all need, if we're going to keep our freedom of speech, then we need to use it. That's the only way we get to keep it. And that's not about being abusive. That's not being an idiot. That's just about asking questions. It's about telling people your opinions. It's about investigating other people's opinions. That's how we keep our society free. Because we're not really free at the moment. We're beginning to lose it all. And it'll be people like you and other politicians around the country who need to step up and need to do a better job. And that's what you've been doing in Tameside because it's obvious. That's why you've been in the press twice this year as a local councillor, which hardly ever happens. So well done. Thank you for doing the work you're doing. And let's catch up again. Another point. Well, let's catch up again when you've been in the press again.
Well, maybe there might be something good that happens in future, and we could talk about that as well. But I'll just end on this. Free speech is so important. What we need to get back to is being able to respectfully disagree with one another. You can be wrong on things, doesn't make you a bad person. And it's through that dialogue and debate that we make ourselves better as a society as we learn along the way. And I think, unfortunately, with all this woke ideology, there's only one way of thinking, and that is dumbing down society.
Absolutely. Liam, thanks for popping on podcast, and I'll catch up with you again soon.
All right, all the best. Thank you very much. Bye bye, Nick.
Bye bye.